Palestinian advocates talk to me about the number of people being killed, I like to remind them there wouldn't be one death if there hadn't been this invasion of the sovereign state of Israel by what happened 2 years ago today. Attorney General Bondi, since your confirmation, you've now had the opportunity to face the federal bureaucracy that you must reform to better serve the American people. As I said to Director Patel, your charter is no simple task. When you arrived, you were left with the Justice Department free fall. Senate Democrats have denied your leadership personnel. We haven't been able to confirm your Assistant Attorney General for Congressional Affairs. It's now been 7 months. All the while, Democrats complain that they can't get answers from the Office of Leg Affairs. They have blocked the confirmation of that person. Since your confirmation, you've taken steps to institute needed reforms. Under your leadership, the Justice Department has cut funding to politicize programs to reinvest in core policing activities. Focusing on crime and getting tough on criminals is a welcome change from 4 years of Biden administration soft on crime policies. During the Biden administration, the Justice Department failed to collect billions of dollars in criminal fines and penalties from corporate offenders. That's money should have been placed in the Crime Victims Fund, and much of the money of the past administration did collect went to the Justice Department slush funds instead of aiding victims of criminals and violent activity. My Democratic colleagues have shared concerns about funding agency and law enforcement, but generally haven't supported funding programs. Under the Democrat leadership, the COPS reauthorization was held over in committee at least 8 times before the 118th Congress concluded. It never received a vote in this committee. More recently, Democrats have refused to support fundamental Justice Department programs like Protect Safe Neighborhoods, and last week, Democrats again blocked most of the Police Week bills from passing the Senate, even though they passed out of this committee unanimously. In contrast to these indefensible positions, the judiciary provisions in the Republican reconciliation bill made hundreds of millions of dollars available to the Justice Department to combat crime. Attorney General Bondi, you've also created task force to attack the problems left by your predecessor. You've created a team to review the overwhelming evidence of political weaponization by federal law enforcement, including the discredited Crossfire Hurricane investigations. Your weaponization working group has worked with my staff to bring forward resolutions for whistleblowers, and I commend you and your staff efforts to find solutions for these patriots. I understand the task force to eradicate anti-Christian bias has done an investigation in how the Biden administration weaponized the government against people of faith. I look forward to your next report on that subject. Now, you've also shuttered a certain task force that was a stain on this country, the Foreign Influence Task Force. Democrats have cried about closing this misleadingly named unit. The task force was involved in undermining my and Senator Johnson's Biden family investigation. Instead of rooting out foreign influence, the task force became a political weapon. And speaking of political weapons, I'm now going to address examples of political weaponization in the previous administration. Most recently, I and Senator Johnson made public information relating to Arctic frost, expansive targeting of Republicans, and on Monday, just yesterday, because of our investigative work, the FBI disclosed that the Biden administration used Arctic frost to target Republican senators, including several senators on this very committee. This is an outrage, an unconstitutional breach, and ought to be immediately addressed by you and Director Patel. It's also a clear example of why the Justice Department has had to fire personnel who you hear Democrats defending. While on the taxpayer's dime, these now fired employees not only weaponized law enforcement, but some of them also retaliated against patriotic whistleblowers. These are indefensible acts. Now I've obtained additional weaponization records thanks to brave whistleblowers that predate Arctic frost. I've obtained documents created by then Supervisory Special Agent Tebow, dated March 2, 2017. The title of this document is quote unquote Trump, and it appears to relate to matters different than Crossfire Hurricane. This document discusses a rumor at FBI headquarters that the FBI's Washington field office was leaning towards opening a case on the Trump campaign. Tebow noted they weren't close to opening an investigation, but did say this, quote, "What are we doing? Aggressively seeking out open source information, human intelligence info that could predicate a case," end of quote. You see, less than 2 months into Trump's first presidency, the partisan Comey FBI was very hard at work trying to manufacture another case against Trump. Tebow and the FBI eventually got their wish in April 2022 with the opening of Arctic frost. This was a political fishing expedition to get Trump at all costs, just like Crossfire Hurricane. And of course, it's a disgrace to the taxpayers. Whistleblowers have provided me with another document. This document is a 2017 case, updated, also drafted by then Supervisor Special Agent Tebow. This is a case update for CR-15, the now disbanded and discredited public corruption squad at FBI's Washington field office, which says, quote, McAuliffe case, Steve Sullivan, Chief Financial Officer of Teneo, was interviewed in New York City. Info provided seemed to confirm Teneo was used as a pass-through for Doug Band to pay former President of the United States, end of quote. Doug Band was deputy assistant to then President Clinton and continued to work for him in post-presidency. Therefore, it's pretty clear that the reference to the President of the United States is Bill Clinton. The document further notes additional interviews the FBI planned to conduct as part of the case. This information confirms there was an FBI case on McAuliffe, and it indicates the Clintons and their associates were relevant to it. Did the FBI throw its resources behind this matter just like it did against Trump and his associates? A legitimate question. Or did they sweep it under the rug? A legitimate question. So, General Bondi, I'd like to have you provide me with all the records relating to these matters for further verification. Lastly, whistleblowers have provided me additional records related to the Biden FBI political conduct against Peter Navarro. The first document is a request for physical surveillance on Navarro the day the FBI arrested him. The second document is a timeline of that surveillance. When Navarro, the FBI didn't arrest him at his house, which was literally right next to the FBI headquarters. Instead, they surveilled him and his fiancée all morning, starting at his home, following them to the airport, and then arrested him in public at the Reagan airport. The way Navarro was treated is unnecessary. General Bondi, I would like you to provide me all records relating to this matter. Attorney General Bondi, this Congress, I've made public one document after another, one whistleblower disclosure after another, one example of weaponization after another. So to our average constituent, this is all history, but it's all pointing out the wrong of government, using the power of government to go after people, they're political people you don't like. We're pointing this all out because we can't have this repeated in the United States. We want to end to it right now, whether we have Republican or Democrat administrations. All evidence of your predecessors' total failures. It's time for accountability. And I look forward to hearing about your success in that regard. Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Chairman Grassley, for holding this oversight hearing. Welcome, Attorney General Bondi. I'm glad that we are following this committee's long-standing tradition of regular oversight hearings with the Attorney General, the Director of the FBI, and the Secretary of Homeland Security. These hearings have never been more important as President Trump turns the full force of the federal government on Chicago and other American cities. The assault on the city I am proud to represent is just one example of how President Trump and Attorney General Bondi shut down justice at the Department of Justice even before the president's party, controlling the White House, Senate, and House of Representatives, shut down the government. The Attorney General has systematically weaponized our nation's leading law enforcement agency to protect President Trump and his allies and attack his opponents and, sadly, the American people. You have purged hundreds of senior career officials since you first appeared before us. These men and women had dedicated their careers to protecting the American people. As a result, the department has lost literally thousands of years of law enforcement expertise. To be specific, you disbanded the FBI's Foreign Influence Task Force and the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team, despite the growing threat of foreign election interference and the drastic rise in cryptocurrency crimes. You forced out almost 75% of the Civil Rights Division's career attorneys, while hate crimes are on the rise. You fired more than 100 immigration judges, while the immigration case backlog is more than 3 million. You cut the public integrity section from 30 prosecutors to 2, while political corruption skyrockets. During your confirmation hearing, I asked you about your many potential conflicts of interest as a former lobbyist. You responded under oath, quote, "You will consult with career ethics officials within the department and make the appropriate decision," end of quote. But the Justice Department then removed those career ethics officials and put in their place inexperienced political appointees beholden to President and you. And you've effectively shut down the Office of Professional Responsibility, which investigates misconduct by Department of Justice attorneys. Now, with these ethical guardrails out of the way, corruption has run rampant at the Department of Justice. Although you've been a registered foreign agent for Qatar, you did not recuse yourself from signing off on President Trump's solicitation of a free jet from the royal family, even though this gift was clearly illegal. Connections to Attorney General Bondi seem to yield more favorable outcomes for defendants. At least 2 long-running federal prosecutions were abruptly dropped after the defendants hired your brother. It's no surprise that Ed Martin, the failed U.S. attorney nominee you appointed as senior official, quoted, said, quote, "No MAGA left behind." Our nation's top law enforcement agency has become a shield for the president and his political allies when they engage in misconduct. Last year, President Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, was allegedly recorded accepting a $50,000 bag of cash in exchange for promising immigration enforcement-related contracts. Under your leadership, the investigation into Mr. Homan was dropped. After President Trump pardoned nearly 1,600 January 6 insurrectionists, including more than 600 charged with assaulting or impeding law enforcement, the Department of Justice is arguing in court that these pardons provide immunity for wholly unrelated crimes in multiple cases. Jared Weiss was filmed on January 6th, encouraging his fellow rioters to attack the Metropolitan Police Department officers. And he said, "F them, kill them." What happened to Mr. Weiss? He's been hired by you as a senior advisor. In February, you said the Epstein client list was, quote, "sitting on my desk right now for review." 8 months later, you still haven't produced these files, and a credible whistleblower told my office that FBI agents were directed to flag any records in which President Trump was mentioned. The Department of Justice ordered the dismissal of corruption charges against the former New York City Mayor Eric Adams in a corrupt backroom deal to secure his cooperation with the president's immigration agenda. Acting U.S. Attorney Daniel Sassoon, a Republican appointed by President Trump, resigned in protest. Acting U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, Eric Siebert, a Republican appointed by President Trump, was forced to resign because he didn't believe there was sufficient evidence to indict New York Attorney General Letitia Adams or former FBI Director James Comey. In his place, President Trump installed his former personal attorney, someone with no prosecutorial experience, to indict Director Comey, which she did. She joins a network of unqualified MAGA loyalists masquerading as federal prosecutors, like Alina Habba, who said she would use her position to, quote, "turn New Jersey red," close quote, and Sigil Chattah, who once said that a black political opponent was, quote, "should be hanging from an effing crane," end of quote. The president and attorney general attempted to bypass the Senate to install these unqualified extremists. Where do you find these people? Courts have ruled that both Ms. Habba and Ms. Chattah are serving in their roles illegally, jeopardizing countless prosecutions by your office. Why? And that's just one example of how the Department of Justice is making America less safe. Attorney General Bondi shut down the Organized Crime and Drug Enforcement Task Force, OSADEF, which has dismantled thousands of criminal organizations. And you diverted thousands of FBI, DEA, and ATF agents and DOJ prosecutors from their critical missions to carry out the president's mass deportation agenda. Attorney General Bondi, not surprisingly, federal drug prosecutions have dropped to the lowest level in decades. Let me repeat that. Federal prosecutions for drug crimes have dropped to the lowest level in decades on your watch. Department of Justice has also unilaterally terminated 373 grants that provide critical funding to state and local law enforcement to the tune of $500 million. The 2026 Trump budget would slash the high-intensity drug trafficking areas program known as HIDA by more than a third, from $300 million to $196 million. Instead of taking common sense steps that have proven to help reduce crime, Attorney General, you're focusing on helping President Trump play strongman on television. He has illegally deployed troops to Chicago and other American citizens and has threatened to send more. The Justice Department defends this dubious legal basis for these deployments and diverts DOJ personnel and their components to assist in these efforts. These deployments basically target Democratic-run cities and Democratic leaders, ignoring many Republican-led areas of our country with even higher crime rates, and making clear that this is for political theater, not public safety. One particular chaotic raid in Chicago Tuesday last week, aided by the FBI and ATF, which you supervise. In the middle of the night, federal agents pulled women and children out of their beds, crashed down the doors to their homes, destroyed their apartments, zip-tied children and others, and detained immigrants and U.S. citizens alike for hours in vans. When one witness complained about the treatment of the small children, an agent laughed at her and said, "F them kids." On Friday, a federal judge appointed by President Trump held that deploying the National Guard in Portland is illegal. White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller accused her of, quote, legal insurrection, close quote. At a time of rising threats to federal judges, this kind of language is inexcusable. Last week, the President and Secretary Hegseth summoned senior military officials to a political pep rally at Quantico, where the President said he wanted to use American cities as, quote, training grounds for our military. Training grounds for our military. To fight the, quote, enemy within. Chicago is not the enemy. Our fellow Americans are not the enemy. It is abhorrent for the President, who is supposed to represent all Americans regardless of political party, to describe anyone who disagrees with him in this manner. To my Republican colleagues who claim the previous administration weaponized the Department of Justice, President Biden retained President Trump's FBI Director Christopher Wray, who President Trump then fired. President Biden never directed the Attorney General to prosecute his political opponents. President Biden never fired his own political appointees for refusing to prosecute his targets. What has taken place since January 20th, 2025 would make even President Nixon recoil. This is your legacy, Attorney General Bondi. In 8 short months, you have fundamentally transformed the Justice Department and left an enormous stain in American history. It will take decades to recover. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Would you please rise so I can give you swear? Do you affirm the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please be seated and give us your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley and Ranking Member Durbin, and every member of this committee. I'm grateful for the opportunity to testify in front of you today. First, please join me in remembering, as you said, Chairman Grassley, all the Jewish people who lost their lives in the October 7th attacks 2 years ago today. Also, please let's pray for all the hostages and the families of all of those individuals. They are a critical reminder of our central mission here at the Department of Justice, protecting the safety and security of the American people. That is why, even when the government is otherwise shut down because of the Democrats, the department's law enforcement officers and prosecutors are hard at work fighting, protecting you from the threats, foreign and domestic. When I was confirmed as the 87th Attorney General of the United States, I took office with 2 main goals: to end the weaponization of justice and return the department to its core mission of fighting violent crime. As to ending the weaponization of justice, we learned that former FBI secretly investigated you and your colleagues. Why? They wanted to take President Trump off the playing field. They were playing politics with law enforcement powers and will go down as a historic betrayal of public trust. This is the kind of conduct that shatters the American people's faith in our law enforcement system. We will work to earn that back every single day. We are returning to our core mission of fighting real crime. While there is more work to do, I believe in 8 short months, we have made tremendous progress towards those ends. Our federal surges in Washington, D.C. and Memphis are a perfect example of how the Department of Justice should operate. We created strong partnerships with local leadership, working hand in hand with both cities to send resources where they were needed most. The results speak for themselves. We have made more than 3,800 arrests here in Washington while seizing more than 365 illegal guns. In Memphis, we have already made more than 300 arrests and close to 80 illegal guns in just a week. We are replicating that tough on crime approach throughout this country. Under the leadership of Director Kash Patel, the FBI is doing outstanding investigative work to keep American people safe. The FBI just conducted a months-long operation called Summer Heat, which resulted in over 8,600 arrests from June to September. More than 6,500 arrests fell under the FBI's violent crime and gang program. Under the leadership of Administrator Terry Cole, the DEA has seized 47.9 million fentanyl pills and 4,500 kilos of fentanyl powder. That represents 370 million deadly doses, 370 million. The DEA is dismantling violent cartel drug trafficking networks across this country, including the seizure of nearly 470 million in criminal assets. Under the leadership of Gadi Serralta, our U.S. Marshals have been the tip of the spear on federal surges in protecting judges and elected officials. Our Marshals have arrested more than 51,000 fugitives nationwide since January 20th. Under the leadership of Acting Director Dan Driscoll, ATF has taken more than 23,000 illegal guns off our streets. 3,400 of those guns have been linked to trafficking between the U.S. and Mexico. My attorneys have done incredible work advancing President Trump's agenda and protecting the executive branch from judicial overreach. We've been sued more than 400 times since January 20th. Judges have issued more than 90 temporary restraining orders against us, more than the previous several administrations combined. Despite the unprecedented degree of activism we've seen from the lower courts, we have never ignored a court order. And why would we? We have secured a historic 22 victories at the Supreme Court alone, with more to come. Our civil rights attorneys are fighting discrimination and anti-Semitism. Our criminal attorneys are prosecuting violent criminals and foreign terrorists every single day. I look forward to continuing this work at the Department of Justice, and I look forward to testifying before you today. Thank you, Chairman.
I forgot to turn on the microphone. Let me start over again. We have 10-minute rounds. I've asked Senator Blackburn to chair between 10:30 and 11. I hope that we can have good decorum during this hearing, treat each other with respect. General Bondi, just in case you get cut off with something that you don't get to answer your question when that senator's done, if you ask me for a little bit of time, not a lot of time, but a little bit of time to finish your answer, I'd be glad to give that to you. So starting myself, you inherited a bloated bureaucracy. It requires reorientation to better serve your mission of the department. That would include reassessing grants disguised to help Americans, but many were partisan pet projects. It also requires reallocation of resources to better serve the American people. On this issue, I've got two questions. What updates can you share with the committee about your review and grant DOJ and grants that DOJ has reassessed? Just give us some examples, don't I know?
Sure. Thank you, Chairman. During my appearance at the department's budget hearings, I acknowledged that some grants were mistakenly terminated, and we have made a process to correct that. All grant termination appeals will be individually considered for alignment with our current policies, which are strengthening law enforcement and protecting victims. Recipients are given the opportunity to appeal a grant termination consistent with the rules by writing to the Assistant Attorney General. Of the 5,800 discretionary grants that were reviewed, only 376, approximately 7%, were terminated. So far, OJP has turned back on 18 awards, 17 appeals have been denied, and the rest are actively being reviewed, with decisions expected soon.
My colleagues on the other side claim that your department has reallocated resources to immigration enforcement, and it's had a negative impact on law enforcement. We know that drugs and crimes are very much a part of immigration enforcement, so these attacks are clearly off the mark. Explain your view of these misguided assertions.
Chairman, every day our FBI, DEA, ATF, and now U.S. Marshals working on a task force with Homeland Security are out there keeping Americans safe and getting illegal aliens out of our country, many of whom have committed violent crimes in this country. Our agents will continue to fight violent crime in this country, working hand in hand. One example is right here in Washington, D.C. We have the D.C. task force that has been incredibly successful. We are so proud of the work that has done. We have been working hand in hand with the local officials here in D.C., and we are very proud of that work. And we're taking that to Tennessee and around this country to keep Americans safe.
I won't repeat the things I've said about Arctic frost, but we had this recent revelation yesterday of my Republican senators being targeted by the government, underscoring the point about Arctic frost. When taken in context with widespread government weaponization against Trump and conservatives in the last decade, the conduct's arguably is worse than Watergate. So I got two questions along this line. How many Department of Justice and FBI personnel have been held accountable for their partisan and constitutional questionable conduct, and what was their punishment? If you could give a few examples or follow up in writing, since there's so many people that fall into this category.
Yes, Senator. Yes, Chairman, we will.
So you want to answer that in writing? Yeah, okay.
Yes, the exact number I can answer in writing. Yes.
Okay. Was Attorney General, on the same subject, was Attorney General Garland, Director Wray, and/or President Biden's White House aware of the FBI targeting Republican senators? Did they approve it? Now, let's be clear, either they knew and allowed it to happen, or they didn't know, and if they didn't know, it points to a lack of oversight of Jack Smith's runaway case.
Chairman Grassley, that's what we've been talking about when we refer to the weaponization of government. Operation Arctic Frost was an unconstitutional, undemocratic abuse of power. During Arctic Frost, the FBI also placed 92 linked Republican individuals and Republican groups, such as Charlie Kirk's Turning Point, on their list. This is the kind of conduct that shattered the American people's faith in our government, as I said in my opening statement. We are ending this weaponization. Our FBI is targeting violent criminals, child predators, and other lawbreakers, not sitting senators who happen to be from the wrong political party. Several of your colleagues sitting at this dais were targeted, and others. We will continue to stop that throughout the Justice Department. That is the ultimate weaponization of government.
Have you sought grand jury secrecy waivers so that all of Arctic Frost documents can be produced to Congress? And if not, do you plan to do that?
Chairman Grassley, I will be working directly with the Director Patel on this issue, and there's not much more we can say about the issue for obvious reasons at this time.
Okay. Public Safety Officers Benefit Program, PSOB, provides benefits to law enforcement and first responders if they're disabled or killed in the line of duty. Affected family members may also benefit. My oversight and a government accountability office report shows that some claims have taken thousands of days to conclude. PSOB applicants have also informed my office that they've been left in tears with disrespectful ways they've been treated by the government. Question number 1 and 2 on this area, but I'll start just with 1. What actions have been taken to hold DOJ officials accountable for their failures to manage the program and treat applicants with respect?
Chairman Grassley, as stated earlier, there have been many terminations from the Department of Justice, and we stand by all of those. Many of those are subject to active litigation. This Department of Justice will treat everyone with respect, and we will do everything in our power to help citizens of this country. Please reach out to us with any individual cases, and I will personally look at them for you, Chairman.
Okay. So if you'll provide that information, that was my second question. So now let's go on to regarding the initial FBI 1023 document that I made public last Congress. That document mentioned 1, text messages, 2, audio recordings, and 3, financial records that allegedly approved a bribery scheme with the Biden family and foreign interest. I asked Director Patel if his predecessors made any effort to determine whether these records existed. He answered no. What steps has the department taken to determine whether these records exist? One way or another, this matter ought to be put to rest.
Chairman Grassley, I know Director Patel is working hard on this with the members of the FBI.
Okay. So we don't know if these records exist, or you just can't say that publicly at this point?
I don't want to discuss any of that publicly,
Okay.
Director.
The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act includes a safeguard to prevent political weaponization. The reauthorization mandated certain members and their staffs shall be entitled to attend any proceedings of the FISA court. Former Biden DOJ Assistant Attorney General Matt Olson drafted a privacy agreement that allowed the department to hide information from Congress during FISA proceedings. Matt Olson made a career out of targeting President Trump and his allies, so it's not surprising that he would attempt to hinder congressional oversight or cover up for the Biden regime. I want to make sure that you get rid of the ridiculous and misguided Olson memo. When can you tell me that will be done?
We will notify you, Chairman Grassley. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Madam Attorney General, let me ask you this question. Were you consulted by the White House before they deployed National Guard troops to cities in the United States?
I am not going to discuss any internal conversations with the White House.
You won't even say whether you talked to the White House about this?
I am not going to discuss any internal conversations with the White House with you, Ranking Member.
I noticed that. What's the secret? Why do you want to keep this secret? The American people don't know the rationale behind the deployment of National Guard troops in my state. The word is, and I think it's been confirmed by the White House, they are going to transfer Texas National Guard units to the state of Illinois. What's the rationale for that?
Yeah, Chairman, as you shut down the government, you voted to shut down the government, and you're sitting here, our law enforcement officers aren't being paid. They're out there working to protect you. I wish you loved Chicago as much as you hate President Trump. And currently, the National Guard are on the way to Chicago. If you're not going to protect your citizens, President Trump will.
Been on this committee for more than 20 years. That's the kind of testimony you expect from this administration. A simple question as to whether or not they had a legal rationale for deploying National Guard troops becomes grounds for a personal attack. I think it's a legitimate question. It's my responsibility. She refuses to answer as to whether she had any conversation with the White House about deploying national troops to my state. That's an indication, I'm afraid, where we are politically in this place. Let me ask you another question. I want to, if you will, hold on a second. Make sure I got the right page of facts here. You testified under oath when you last before this committee that before your appointment to Attorney General, you had served as a representative of some sort for the royal family of Qatar. There was an issue that came before you in May when President Trump accepted a $400 million luxury jet from the royal family of Qatar for temporary use as Air Force One before it's permanently gifted to the Trump Presidential Library Foundation. The Constitution unequivocally bestows on Congress the power to control whether any officer of the United States, including the President, may accept a gift, quote, from any king, prince, or foreign state, end of quote. And this gift clearly violates the statutory regime enacted by Congress. You've refused to answer a letter I sent to you 5 months ago asking the legal rationale you relied on to advise President Trump to accept this unprecedented gift from your former legal client. Can you make a promise today that you will disclose that?
Disclose what, Ranking Member?
I assume there was a letter or some sort of statement from your office to the White House to advise them that you felt it was permissible?
First, to address my role with Qatar, as I addressed with you during my confirmation hearing, I disclosed it in my SJQ. In private practice, I worked for Qatar for anti-human trafficking for the World Cup. That was my only involvement, and I made that very clear, and I'm very proud of everything I've done with anti-human trafficking. Obviously, in preparing any advice for the President on a jet or anything else, we consult with the Office of Legal Counsel. The confidentiality applies to their input as well. And Chairman, if you would approve and vote to approve, as Chairman Grassley said, excuse me, Ranking Member, as Chairman Grassley said, my employees, we would answer your letters a lot faster, yet you're stalling them at every stop. And to go back to your previous question, your city has a murder rate 5 times higher than New York's. 571 homicides last year. If you were serious about protecting your people, you would be asking this administration for help. You're saying that we're coming into your state and your city. We're there to help make America safe and Illinois safe, whether or not you want to.
I believe cutting federal grant programs to law enforcement in my state and across the nation does not make us any safer, and you've done just that. You've supplanted that decision by sending in National Guard troops to California and other places. That is a situation where the governors have not asked for that help. If you truly wanted to do this on a bipartisan basis, you wouldn't defy a governor, you would work with them. I'm prepared to do that. I'm prepared to work with this administration. But cutting these grants to law enforcement does not make us any stronger as a nation or give us the tools we need to reduce crime in Chicago. Now, I'd just like to ask you, when it came to this Qatar situation, did you consult with the ethics office in the Department of Justice before making your decision on this gift of a jet?
Chairman, I didn't gift a jet to anyone. My Office of Legal Counsel provides confidential advice to the President, to the White House, period. And you're conflating two issues. Cutting grants, I was very clear about what grants we've cut and what grants we haven't, only 7%. And if you have a grant in Illinois that you think that I've cut that is protecting law enforcement officers or your people, you personally call me and I will work with you to turn that grant back on. I think many of the Democrats here can tell you, I have worked with them to turn grants back on. There's an appeal process. Tell me a specific grant that I have turned off in Illinois that would help law enforcement, and I will work with you. But you have not done that.
Did you
and
take
again,
a look?
the National Guard is on the way right now as we speak. Oh, by the way, so is Director Patel and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. You're sitting here grilling me, and they're on their way to Chicago to keep your state safe.
Madam Attorney General, it's my job to grill you. Investigation of your agency is part of my responsibility and this committee. You may not like the experience, but others have weathered the storm and answered questions in a respectful manner.
Can you tell me the grants,
Yes.
Ranking Member, please?
Take a look at the president's budget on HIDA grants. What happens to it in his proposed budget?
I'd be glad to meet with you on the
It's
grants.
cut by 1/3 from $300 million to 196. That's one example of a grant that works, and your administration has suggested cutting it in the budget lies ahead. I want to ask you about items in a letter I sent you in July that you have not answered. In February, you made a public claim that the Epstein client list was, quote, sitting on my desk right now for review, end of quote. You then produced already public information and no client list at a major media event hosted at the White House. Attorney General Bondi, why did you publicly claim to have the Epstein client list waiting for your review and then produce nothing relevant to that claim?
Senator Durbin, if you listen to my entire clip on that, I said I had not reviewed it yet, that it was sitting on my desk along with the JFK files, the Martin Luther King files, and I said I had not yet reviewed it. And if you see our memo on Epstein, you will see, excuse me, our memo on Epstein clearly points out that there was no client list, our July 6th memo. You also didn't let me respond to the HIDTA question. The budget transfers $196 million for high-intensity drug trafficking areas to the Office of Justice Programs, OJP. The Justice Department will continue to administer those grants under OJP in 2026.
Going back to the Epstein files, according to another whistleblower who made a protected disclosure to my office, you pushed the FBI to review approximately 100,000 Epstein-related records on an arbitrarily short deadline in March, and the FBI was directed to flag any documents that mentioned President Trump. Nothing came of that review until July when DOJ and FBI released an unsigned memo stating, quote, there's no incriminating client list. Why was the July 7th memo unsigned?
The July 7th memo came from the FBI and the Department of Justice. Director Patel answered those questions very clear. And, you know, Senator Durbin, I find it very interesting that you refused repeated Republican requests to release the Epstein flight logs in 2023 and 2024. You fought that. Did you take money from Reid Hoffman, campaign donations,
Never
who was a
heard.
huge Epstein friend? Why did you fight for years? Why did you fight to not disclose the flight logs, Senator Durbin?
I can tell you I did not refuse. One of the senators here wished to produce those logs, and I asked her to put it in writing, and she never did.
Yeah, I think Senator Blackburn would quarrel with you on that. But
Well,
that's
I will
up to the
quarrel
two
with
of
you as to read somebody that you mentioned I never heard of.
Reid Hoffman.
So who gave the order to flag records related to President Trump?
To flag records for President Trump?
To flag any records which included his name?
I'm not going to discuss anything about that with you, Senator.
Eventually, you're going to have to answer for your conduct in this. You won't do it today, but eventually you will. I yield, Mr. Chairman.
I got to
Mr.
interject
Chairman?
something here.
Mr.
before I
Chairman.
get to Pam.
Mr. Chairman, since Senator Durbin referred to me, I would really appreciate the opportunity to correct the record.
Proceed.
Because Senator Durbin knows I repeatedly asked for those flight logs. I brought up the subpoena. You even shut down the committee because you didn't want that, and you know I submitted that in writing, and you continue to misrepresent that, and I am not going to let that record stand.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
go ahead, Senator Durbin.
I just want to make it clear that the reason the committee business ended was that your side invoked the 2-hour rule. Point number 2 is I asked you if you wanted any documents like flight logs to put it in writing. You never did.
Yes, sir, I did, and your staff knows that I did.
No,
We'll submit, once again,
Send me a copy of
the
that,
information to you. We've done that several times, but we'll be happy to, once again, send it to you. I think your staff doesn't show that to you.
Well, as I started to say about the emolument clause, and Democrats bringing that up in regard to Qatar, back in March of 2016, they didn't care anything about my bringing up the emolument clause in regard. I wrote to the Obama Justice Department. That letter was based on Secretary Clinton's 2009 to 2013 financial disclosures when she was Secretary of State. Those disclosures showed that her husband participated in at least 62 events with foreign states. Some of those were speaking events with connections to foreign governments, and some speaking events were financially supported by foreign governments. Two examples, Bill Clinton received hundreds of thousands of dollars for appearance sponsored by Middle Eastern governments. Bill Clinton also received $200,000 for a speech connected to the Chinese government. And I don't recall getting any help from my Democrat colleagues on that investigation. Senator Graham.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. So I want to make sure I got this clear. If a Democrat or a Republican senator has a problem with a grant that's been canceled or reduced, you would be glad to talk to them.
Yes, Senator, and I have been doing that as well.
There have been Democratic members who called you,
They have spoken to my office, yes, Senator.
and you've tried to respond.
On either side of course, if it has anything to do with law
So-
enforcement or victims,
And that includes Senator Durbin. If he's got a problem, he can call you and you'll try to respond.
absolutely.
Thank you. How many illegal immigrants are in Chicago?
Ooh.
Does anybody know?
I do, countless. What we have seen since January 20th, Senator Graham, is a 1,000% increase in violent attacks against our ICE officers.
Right. But I just want to know, is there like 10 or 100,000? Does anybody know?
There have been multiple, and we have made multiple arrests, of course, involving violent gangs
Yeah,
in Chicago,
Right.
throughout Illinois.
Right. So the only reason I ask that is Chicago is sanctuary city. Do they help ICE deal with illegal immigration, or they're sanctuary city? Do you know?
They are not cooperating, and I would ask that, I wish Senator Durbin would condemn the governor for not cooperating with our law enforcement officers.
The only reason I mention this, if you're a sanctuary city, any place in the country, you're making it difficult for the rest of us. Because word gets out, if you get to a certain city, maybe Chicago being one of them, that you're home free, and that just encourages more illegal immigration. Do you deal with that? Agree with that?
I do, Senator Graham, and can I add something to that?
Sure.
Please. One of our biggest wins was against the Sinaloa cartel, and that came in Chicago. The state of Illinois has a Trust Act, which prevents local law enforcement from cooperating with our federal immigration authorities. And that's what I was trying to talk to Senator Durbin about. On September 15th, our partners at ICE arrested an illegal alien from Mexico for beating a 21-year-old man to death. He had been imprisoned in Illinois prior to the murder and was released under Illinois' Trust Act. We filed multiple lawsuits in Illinois for sanctuary policies, specifically in-state tuition for illegal aliens and obstructing employers from verifying citizenship. You can't make this up. On September 5th, a federal grand jury in Chicago indicted a major Sinaloa cartel boss, narco-terrorism, guns, and drug charges. On July 11th, we announced a guilty plea for Ovidio Guzman Lopez. You may know him as the son of El Chapo, one of the worst narco-terrorists in the world. In the world,
In
Senators.
Chicago.
In Chicago. In Chicago. He entered a guilty plea to drug conspiracy and 2 counts of knowingly engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise in the state of Illinois. I could continue with fentanyl. I could continue with child predators in Illinois.
Well, thank you. I think I've seen numbers over 100,000. So Chicago and other sanctuary cities, you're making it harder for us to deal with illegal immigration by doing what you're doing. And I am glad President Trump is trying to change those policies. And if you need the National Guard to bring order out of chaos, so be it from my point of view. Now let's get back to the topic sort of at hand here about how the law is being used politically. In September 2022, Attorney General James from New York basically said in a campaign that she would go after Trump, his business transactions, and his family with full force. November the 15th, 2022, Trump announces his candidacy for president. November 2022, 3 days after Trump announced his reelection campaign, Jack Smith was appointed by Garland to be special counsel to look at classified information, document mishandling, and trying to undermine the 2020 election. In March, President Trump was indicted in Manhattan of 2023, just after announcing 34 felony counts. What they did is they took misdemeanors and turned them into felonies by using a legal theory that no one in the history of Manhattan had ever been charged with. June 2023, a federal grand jury in the District Court for the Southern District of Florida indicted President Trump on 37 charges regarding classified information. Now, all I can say is that taking a hammer to a hard drive in bleach bit apparently doesn't make the cut. Having documents in the garage of President Biden doesn't make the cut. In August of 2023, he was indicted yet again regarding the 2020 election. So all I can say is that in September 27th, Jack Smith's team asked for my phone records and 7 other senators. Now that's just the 2024 election. Comey, are you aware of the fact that in August, Comey, then director FBI, August of 2016, was in a meeting at the White House where it was discussed that by Brennan, then CIA director, that there was intelligence that maybe the Clinton campaign was trying to cook up a narrative that Trump was a Russian asset?
Senator, I believe that has been reported publicly, but I cannot comment on that.
Okay, well, I'm just telling you. Now, this is a campaign for president in 2016. In July, they open up Crossfire Hurricane. In August, they have a discussion in front of President Biden that there's intel that maybe this is generated by his political opponent. Nothing happened. In September, are you aware of the fact that the intelligence community sent a memo to the FBI director detailing intelligence that suggests it's Clinton's campaign is behind the idea that Trump is colluding or cooperating with the Russians?
Senator, I believe that has been reported.
And that was addressed to the FBI director and Mr. Strzok, this memo. Are you aware that he told this committee, I don't recall that, the FBI director?
Senator, I can't discuss anything.
Well, I can
regarding
tell you this. What the hell would you recall? You're the sitting FBI director. There's a campaign for president going on. You've opened up an investigation believing that the Republican candidate may be a Russian asset. And now all of a sudden, less than a month later, 2 months later, you have 2 inquiries, 2 events to suggest it may be his political opponent. Did anybody in the FBI inform the FISA court or anyone else about this activity that you know of?
I can't discuss that matter, as you know, Senator Graham.
Should they have? Is there a requirement by law enforcement to tell the court if their warrant is being sought or a defendant that there's exculpatory information out there about you?
In general, of course, Senator.
So, to the country, the FBI director gets a memo from the intel community. This may be all a political plot by his opponent. They didn't do a damn thing. Are you familiar with the Steele dossier?
Yes, Senator.
That was a dossier prepared and paid for by the Clinton campaign. Are you aware that it was that document was used to get a warrant on 5 different occasions against Carter Page, an American citizen?
Yes, Senator, and that has been
Are you aware of the fact in February 2017, after Trump is president, the person who gave Christopher Steele the information, the Russian guy, told the FBI, the information I provided you was all bar talk. hearsay and not reliable. Are you aware of that?
Yes, Senator.
Was there ever an effort by the FBI to tell the FISA court about evidence that the man who helped prepare the document retracted his statement?
I can't discuss that, Senator.
Should there have been?
Can't discuss that.
You wonder why we're looking at Comey? Give me a break. Why are we looking at Comey? Because he ran an FBI and personally knew about exculpatory information and let it slide. How in the hell can two FBI agents interview a man who says the document you're using against a sitting president to suggest he may be a Russian agent or Carter Page that is now no longer reliable? How does that not get to the court? Can you tell me how that doesn't get to the court? You can't, can you?
I can't, Senator, and I
Can
can't
you tell me
discuss it.
why my phone records, when I'm the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, were sought by the Jack Smith agents? Why did they ask to know who I called and what I was doing from January 4th to the 7th? Can you tell me that?
No, Senator, and there were 8 senators in total.
Do you think that was an abuse of power?
Senator, I cannot discuss whether there is or is not an ongoing investigation. If I may add one thing, they also wasted $50 million on what you just described, trying to put President Trump in jail prior to the election.
Before Senator Whitehouse, I want to introduce into the record what is called the Durham Annex. The annex is a declassified appendix to John Durham's report about Crossfire Hurricane. The Durham Annex contains information exposing a reported Clinton campaign plan to falsify and tie President Trump to Russia. For years, I've fought to assemble and publicize all the facts surrounding Durham investigation, Crossfire Hurricane, and related matters. The Durham Annex was declassified as a large part because of Attorney General Bondi.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
may I ask you a question?
if I can answer it, yes. Go
Thank you,
ahead.
Mr. Chairman. Are you going to hold a separate hearing on your whistleblower account of the FBI investigation of 8 United States senators?
I think we need, my answer to your question is, I think we need to wait until we see what the FBI can report and whether it's necessary to have a hearing. Right now, I haven't ruled one out, but I haven't made a decision.
And what year do you think that will happen in?
I want the FBI to be a thorough investigation of it and report to us what information they can give us, and I don't know how long that'll take them.
With respect, are you giving them a certain period of time?
I have not given them a certain period of time. I'll discuss that matter with my staff and see if that needs to be done.
Okay, if civil suits are filed against the perpetrators at the FBI, will that facilitate your investigation?
Well, what's the question again?
If the 8 senators who were spied upon sue the hell out of the Department of Justice and the perpetrators involved, will that facilitate their investigation and/or yours? I guess what I'm getting to is, I don't understand why we don't have a separate hearing. I find this breathtaking.
Yeah. It's just been 24 hours since the FBI investigated on it. Please give me an opportunity to sort through all this.
Fair enough. I just don't want to wait 24 years to get an answer.
Yeah. We do have an active investigation going on through my staff. I want to make that very clear. Mr. Whitehouse, or Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Bondi, good morning.
Good morning.
What became of the $50,000 in cash that the FBI paid to Mr. Homan in a paper bag, evidently?
Senator, as Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche recently stated, the investigation of Mr. Homan was subjected to a full review by the FBI, agents, and DOJ prosecutors. They found no credible evidence of any wrongdoing.
And that was not my question. My question was, what became of the $50,000 in cash that the FBI delivered, evidently in a paper bag, to Mr. Homan?
Senator, I'd look at your facts.
Are you saying that they did not deliver $50,000 in cash to Mr. Homan?
Senator, as recently stated, the investigation of Mr. Homan was subjected to a full
A different
review
question.
by the FBI agents,
That's a
by
different
Department
question.
of Justice prosecutors. They found no evidence of wrongdoing.
That's a different question. What became of the $50,000? Did the FBI get it back?
Mr. Whitehouse, excuse me, Senator Whitehouse, you're welcome to talk to the FBI.
The report to you, can't you answer this question?
Senator Whitehouse, you're welcome to discuss this with Director Patel.
Did Homan keep the $50,000?
As Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche recently stated, the investigation of Mr.
Never mind.
Homan
I can
was
see I'm not going to get a
subject
straight
to full
answer from you to
review
a very simple
by
question.
the FBI agents and the DOJ.
Do
They
you
found
know-
no credible evidence of wrongdoing. You know, you're very concerned about money and people taking money, and
Do
you
you
rail
know-
against
wait a
dark
second, wait a
money.
second, wait a
Yet you
second,
work with dark
wait a
money
second.
groups all the time, Senator
Wait a
Whitehouse.
second. Did you know whether or not in that investigation they looked at whether the 2024 $50,000 payment to Mr. Homan was declared by him on his tax returns?
Senator, I would be more concerned if I were you when you talk about corruption and money, that when you pushed for legislation that would subsidize your wife's company.
The questions here are actually pretty specific. So having you respond with completely irrelevant far-right internet talking points really is not very helpful here. I'd like, Mr. Chairman, you generally like to have us be able to get answers to know, and we'll follow up with the QFR. And to the extent Patel wants to answer, that would be great as well. What happened to the $50,000? Did Homan keep it? Did the FBI get it back? If he kept it, did he put it on his tax returns? Pretty simple questions. Homan was the same guy who said there was a deal with Eric Adams. He said, if Adams doesn't come through, I'll be back. I'll be in his office, up his butt, saying, where the hell is the agreement we came to? Which brings us to the OPR investigation of prosecutorial misconduct by Emil Bovee, because he was also involved in that transaction. Yeah. What became of the OPR investigation of prosecutorial misconduct by Emil Bovee?
Yeah, Senator Whitehouse, to correct you for one moment, that would be the Honorable Judge Emil J. Bovee III to you.
Not at the time of this. He was an employee of the Department of Justice. And what became of the OPR investigation?
It's
into
all
his
pending litigation,
misconduct?
Senator. I can't discuss pending litigation nor personnel matters.
OPR customarily publicly says when there's an investigation, and at the end of it, they provide a summary. Why can't you say whether there's an OPR investigation and whether, if it's concluded, there's a summary?
Senator, I'm not going to discuss personnel matters.
Even public ones.
Senator, I'm not going to discuss personnel matters.
So, Kash Patel told this committee that his grand jury testimony after immunization, after initially pleading the Fifth, was, and I quote, sealed by the Department of Justice. How and when and why was his testimony sealed, and by whom?
Senator, I'm not going to discuss any testimony, especially testimony that could be sealed with you.
No, the question is, was it or was it not sealed?
Senator, I'm not going to discuss that with you.
Well, he also said that he worked with the Department of Justice to have his transcript released publicly. How and when was his transcript released? Presumably, if he released it publicly, that's something you can discuss because it's public.
Well, Senator, I believe you discussed that with Director Patel.
And I'm asking you because he said the Department of Justice made this decision and you run the Department of Justice.
I would refer that to Director Patel.
Even though you run the Department of Justice and he testified that the Department of Justice released his transcript publicly.
If it is released publicly, we will get you a copy, Senator, gladly.
If being a rather important word there, when your FBI director testified that that was a fact. Treasury compiles suspicious activity reports, referred to often as SARs, that DOJ receives automatically. Hundreds related to accounts of Jeffrey Epstein. How many of those Treasury SARs did you or Director Patel investigate?
Senator, I'm not sure if you're concerned because you took money, I believe, did you, from Reid Hoffman, one of Epstein's closest confidants, not only once but twice in 2018 and 2024, if that's correct. But Senator, did you ask Merrick Garland any of this over the last 4 years when he sat before you? This investigation has been going on. This investigation was closed. Did you ask Alex Acosta
When
that?
you and Patel came to office, you said you would look into this. There were hundreds of suspicious activity reports. Some people would deduce from the fact that they are called suspicious activity reports that there might be suspicious activity. And yet you seem to have looked at 0 of those suspicious activity reports involving Jeffrey Epstein accounts. Let me ask you something else. There's been public reporting that Jeffrey Epstein showed people photos of President Trump with half-naked young women. Do you know if the FBI found those photographs in their search of Jeffrey Epstein's safe or premises or otherwise? Have you seen any such thing?
You know, Senator Whitehouse, you sit here and make salacious remarks, once again trying to slander President Trump left and right, when you're the one who was taking money from one of Epstein's closest confidants, I believe, I could be wrong, correct me, Reid Hoffman, who was with Jeffrey Epstein on multiple occasions. And the senator sitting right next to you tried to block the flight logs from being released. Yet you're grilling me on President Trump and some photograph with Epstein? Come on.
The question is, did the FBI find those photographs that have been discussed publicly by a witness who claimed Jeffrey Epstein showed them to him? You don't know anything about that? Okay. Here's what well, no, we cut to something else. The Marshal Service is supposed to protect our federal judges. I have asked repeatedly for the Marshal Service to let me know if they are investigating or being inhibited from investigating whether or not there is orchestration of threats against federal judges, whether under either conspiracy laws or racketeering enterprise laws or aiding and abetting laws, whatever. But as you know, there's the person who says the threat, and then there may very well be somebody orchestrating the threat behind them. Is the Marshal Service allowed to investigate orchestration of threats, and do you know if they've taken one step to do so?
May I answer the question, Chairman Grassley? The time has expired.
I think it's the convention of the committee that if I've started my question in my time, you may answer the question.
I was asking the chairman.
Okay, before I go to Cornyn.
She wants to answer the question, Chairman.
Oh, please go ahead. I thought you said you didn't want to answer it. I'm
Yes, sir.
sorry.
Thank you. Senator Whitehouse, I would be happy to sit down with you regarding any threat to any federal judge in this country. We take threats very seriously. I will set a meeting with you, with Director Seralta of the U.S. Marshals, and I will be there. And we will talk about any threats on federal judges.
Including
who
orchestration.
threatened them or who orchestrated them.
Bingo, thank you.
Okay. Before Cornyn speaks, I get kind of amused about my Democratic colleagues bringing up Treasury suspicious activity reports regarding Epstein. When Senator Johnson and I issued our Biden family reports in 2020, we used information from these very same type of documents. And you know what? We were criticized by our Democratic colleagues for doing so, and for years they ignored the evidence of the Biden family criminality. I don't think my colleagues can have it both ways. Senator Cornyn.
General Bondi, 6 out of 10 Americans say they live from paycheck to paycheck. And I'm sure that includes a lot of federal employees, Border Patrol, FBI agents, people who support them, frontline prosecutors. Do you find it somewhat inconsistent that our Democratic colleagues claim to support law enforcement and the rule of law, but yet they vote to deny those same individuals the pay which they've earned?
Yes, Senators, our law enforcement agencies, DEA, ATF, FBI, U.S. Marshals, and all the other federal agencies, Homeland Security, Treasury, all the agencies, all of my federal prosecutors, all of our employees are working tirelessly, national security, around the clock to keep this country safe and to keep this world safe. Yet, the Democrats voted to shut the government down, and they are out there working without a paycheck, with families at home, risking their lives every single day. Thank you for pointing that out, and thank you for caring, Senator Cornyn.
So let's get back to some basics. The Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land, is it not?
Yes, sir.
Applies to all Americans, the entire country. Federal law, likewise, applies to the entire nation, does it not?
Yes, Senator.
And so when federal law enforcement agents go to cities like Chicago to enforce federal law, they are acting within their authority, are they not?
Yes, Senator Cornyn.
So on what legal basis would a governor or a mayor say, we're going to deny or prevent a federal law enforcement agent from enforcing federal law? What would be the legal basis for them to do that?
You know, Senator, there's not one. And as I stated, there were 571 homicides in Chicago last year. And that's why right now Director Patel and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche are on their way to Chicago. I've been to Memphis. They're in Chicago right now to protect the people of Illinois. And what Senator Graham, the point he was trying to make earlier, was that when you don't cooperate with law enforcement, if I was a TDA member, if I was a Sinaloa cartel narco-terrorist, you know where I'd go? Chicago, because they're not enforcing the law. And they're running their operations, as I stated earlier, two of the biggest terrorists, narco-terrorists, we arrested right in Chicago because it was a safe haven for them. And they're operating these networks around our entire country. So we are going to keep our entire country safe. We're going to protect all Americans. If these senators aren't going to vote to open our government, to let these people, our people, work with paychecks, they're going to do it anyway, whether or not the locals are cooperating with them. We're going to be there protecting all Americans in this country, Senator Cornyn.
I find it, the comparison between the nation's, Washington, D.C., here in the nation's capital, where the mayor has welcomed the federal law enforcement agents, which as I travel around the city, are providing a level of deterrence against crime that I have not seen before. And Washington, D.C. happens to be one of the most dangerous metropolitan areas in the country. So seeing what the response has been by local officials here in Washington, D.C., seeing how the public here who visits here as tourists from Texas and elsewhere, how they're welcoming this federal law enforcement